we can begin on that case, and I do note this morning that we do have several cases that have some significant emotional issues in it, and I'm going to ask that there be no outbursts in the courtroom during these proceedings so that we can attempt to run them smoothly.
And I'm going to cut it.
And just so your Honor's aware, Ms. Guadalupe was signed up in person, so not with permission, she actually signed up.
All right. All right, good morning, Ms. Guadalupe. All right, first want to advise you that you are entitled to have your case heard live in an open court. It is my understanding today that you would like to go forward with this sentencing through this video process. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and would you let me know if you don't understand anything that I say? State's counsel, your attorney, and I believe there may be some other people that may speak during the process. Is that correct today?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and so they'll need to come up so that Ms. Guadalupe will be able to hear.
Yes, when they come to speak, I'll have them up here.
All right, very good. All right, Ms. Guadalupe, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you'll give in this proceeding is the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, would you state your full name?
Gabriel Guadalupe.
And Ms. Guadalupe, how old are you?
57.
How far did you go in school?
I am grade.
Do you read, write, understand English?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you a United States citizen?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's my understanding that you are here today with regard to indictment 2022 CR 0576 involving count 1, contributing to the dependency of a minor, and count 2, possession of methamphetamine.
Yes.
All right, and it is also my understanding, I've been given paperwork that indicates to me that you wish to enter guilty pleas to those charges.
Yes.
All right, in reaching your decision to enter your pleas of guilty, did anyone threaten, force, pressure, or intimidate you?
Oh, ma'am.
Anyone promise you leniency in return for your guilty pleas?
No.
Are your guilty pleas being made of your own free will?
Excuse me?
Are your guilty pleas being made of your own free will? And that it's your decision to enter a guilty plea?
Yes.
All right, and do you understand that when you enter a guilty plea, that you give up your legal and constitutional rights to remain silent, to confront and cross-examine witnesses, and your right to a jury trial?
Yes.
All right, do you understand that for these offenses, the maximum sentencing range on count 1, contributing to the dependency of a minor, is up to 10 years in confinement, and with regard to the possession of methamphetamine, up to 3 years in confinement?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and has your attorney gone over with you the indictment, the minimum and maximum sentences?
Yes, ma'am.
Has your attorney reviewed with you the discovery and witnesses and any evidence in the case?
Yes. I have everything.
All right, and is there a plea offer or agreement in the case?
They are.
All right. All right, go ahead then from the state.
Your Honor, this offense took place in March of 2022. Essentially, the defendant in this case is the great-grandmother of the victim. The victim right over here, Serenity Garnett. She was 7 months old at the time. Basically, the parents of the child were in school, actually still in high school at the time. Grandmother of the child dropped the 7-month-old over at this defendant's home early in the morning. It was, a regular practice, I guess, that she was supposed to care for the child during the day. When grandmother arrives, the defendant is there with a unidentified black male. We never were able to figure out who he was. He actually, according to the grandmother, it definitely appeared as though they were very well familiar with each other, meaning the defendant and this unknown male. He actually took the baby carrier, they went into the house, and proceeded to, the grandmother left. At Columbia County Dispatch got a call. Actually, there was a fire truck that was driving, doing some sort of maintenance on the road, fire hydrants or something. When they were approached later on that morning by the defendant, and she comes running out of the house indicating that something is wrong, that this child has been injured. The first responders that arrived, that were there on scene, and the ones that then later arrived, the paramedics, all indicated that her demeanor, it was very apparent to them. I mean, obviously they were more concerned with the child at that point, but they were concerned about her mental state, basically indicating that they believed that she was under the influence of some sort of illegal substance based upon her actions. Essentially, once law enforcement arrived, they were able to kind of figure out that they went into the house. It was, on the kitchen table, or on the kitchen counter, there was apparent methamphetamine. They had been smoking meth that morning. The defendant actually gave a couple of different accounts about what happened. First, she indicated that she and the baby were laying on her bed, and that the dog there was a dog at this house that did not belong to the defendant. It actually belongs to the owner of the house, who was in prison at the time. The dog busted into the room and jumped on the bed and attacked them. Then she also gave a different story, that she was in the kitchen making the baby a bottle, and she heard the baby cry. So she goes into the room, and the dog is attacking the baby, who was confined in a stroller at the time. She admitted that she had drugs in the kitchen, and told law enforcement it was the first time she's ever smoked meth. There was a stroller on scene. It did appear to be tipped over. It also had dog hair. The baby ultimately was covered in dog bites from, basically the only part that was really kind of not covered in dog bites was her torso, but basically her arms and her legs were covered in dog bites. There was also an insinuation that she, at one point, laid on the floor for 25 minutes before she was able to get up and go outside and scream for help. Ultimately, the baby did die from these injuries. Essentially, blood loss contributed to the cause of death here. But she was never able to identify the individual that was with her that day. It would have been helpful to have his information. I think that's one of the major sticking points for the family, is that they really don't know exactly what happened that day. That was something they were really looking for, was to know exactly what happened. Who was this guy? The defendant indicated to law enforcement that she didn't know who the guy was, that she had only met him like a couple of times, but again, that would be inconsistent with what the grandmother observed that morning. It seemed as though they were very well acquainted with each other, but ultimately, law enforcement was never able to figure out who he was. The dog was ultimately put down. The family has a lot of remarks that they would like to make, and I would just like, Your Honor, to hear from them after Ms. Guadalupe's presentation, so that they can have the last word, if that's okay with Your Honor. Just to kind of give you a rundown, she's actually from New York. She doesn't have any other Georgia history. However, she does have history in the state of New York. She had a criminal possession of a controlled substance in the 7th degree in 1996 that she was convicted on. Another criminal sale of controlled substance in the 3rd degree, that was conviction in 1996. She has criminal possession of a controlled substance in the 7th degree. That was a conviction from 2000. She has another 2006 conviction of criminal possession of a controlled substance in the 7th degree. That was in 2007. Another 2007 criminal possession of a controlled substance in a different month of the same year, 2007. She had a petty larceny that ultimately it says covered by a related case. That was a 2014 disposition. She had possession of a forged instrument in the 3rd degree conviction in 2014. She has an abandonment of animals conviction in 2014, and all of that history coming from out of New York. But at this time, I would just ask that Your Honor hear from Mr. McCants. There isn't a plea agreement in this case. Obviously, she's facing a total amount of time. She's eligible for 13 years, and I just ask that before you make your decision, obviously, that you hear from the victims.
All right, I do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
What was the time of drop-off, and what was the time
It was early in the morning,
fire department
like
was
8, I
contacted?
want to say, around just prior to 8, and it was like a couple of hours later, it was like 10. No, I'm sorry, 12:50 was the first person. Yeah. The actual call came in. What does the note say? I'm sorry. But the first person, it looks like, arrived at 12:50, so it had to be 12:16. Excuse me. 12:16 was the time that it was called into dispatch.
And at the time that, I guess you indicated that Miss Guadalupe ran out of the home to a fire truck, is there any indication of, you indicated there was significant blood loss. Is there any indication as to whether it had happened, the incident had happened immediately prior thereto,
Yes.
or there had been a time period?
Well, it's impossible to say. I mean, like I said, she acknowledged that she laid on the floor for 25 minutes before she was able to get up and run out of the house. It's unclear why she didn't call 911, because she did have apparently several cell phones inside the residence. She didn't call 911 though. It just happened to be kind of, I won't say lucky, but she walked outside and there happened to be a fire. It just happenstance that there was a fire truck out there. But it was, I mean, they were working on that baby. They did not pronounce death until they got to the hospital. So they were trying to do whatever they could to resuscitate the child. So apparently the child wasn't cold, or, it wasn't apparent that the child was beyond, help at the time. All of the first responders involved indicated, that they felt that there could have been a chance that they could have revived her. They did what they could.
All right. Was there a cell phone check of any of the cell phones to try to identify?
She did not make any calls. In fact, she did in fact call her mother in New York, but she called from a first responder's phone.
But possibly to identify the person that was there?
Columbia County, I tried. I was very persistent about that, and they were never able to. And I even talked to the family on numerous occasions trying to figure out if they could help me provide, get some information. It was just a ghost in the wind. I mean, we know there was a second person there because the grandmother saw the second, and she acknowledges that there was a second person there, but according to the defendant, she doesn't know who he is.
All right,
Thank you, Judge. And can we briefly approach?
certainly.
I understand the sentencing, Your Honor, as well, I do, but I understand that there's pain with the victim speaking last. I'm not expecting to. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
So at this time, I just wanted to present some stuff about my client, Ms. Guadalupe. Just starting with what Your Honor had just been asking about in terms of the in terms of the wounds on the victim and whether there had been a long period of time that had elapsed. One thing with that is that my client did have a number of very severe defensive wounds as well. And that's something, that's not contested. I mean, that was something that the first responders observed, and then the jail had to help treat when she was taken there. But she had cuts and bites all over her arms and legs. Now, my client, when she's talking about how she was laying on the floor and able to get up, she's explained to me, I'm not saying it's expert evidence or anything, but she's explained to me that because of her diabetes, which she does have, she actually had lost a toe at the jail and they had to take her to the hospital. But she had stents in her legs. One of the dog bites was on her leg, and then she said basically the stent popped and she was unable to get up. That's not what we're here for today, but I just wanted to give Your Honor a little clarity that at the very least, this was a case where my client was trying to fight the dog, at least for some amount of time. Now, we're not contesting the fact that there were drugs at the scene, that they were tested, and that they were in fact methamphetamine. We're not contesting that. This is a horrible tragedy. My client is taking responsibility for the tragedy. All I wanted to make clear in terms of that was just that my client was at some point fighting the dog, trying to get the dog off of her and the child. It's also something where my client has been extremely remorseful. She had prepared a letter for today, but I think mainly she just wants to apologize to her great-granddaughter and the family that's all here. This is a horrific tragedy. Again, something that she's taking responsibility for, but we did want Your Honor to know, and I think when the case was arrested versus how the state indicted it, I think that's reflected in how they indicted it. They understand that this is not something that was intentional on my client's part, that she was trying to inflict this harm on the baby. Obviously that doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't change how serious this is and how big of a tragedy it is. But I just wanted to address that. Regarding my client, again, I've gotten into her medical history a little bit. She has had a number of health issues at the jail. I also wanted to mention she's been in custody since the date that this happened. So she's been in custody now since March 25th of last year. So basically, exactly a year and 1 month. She is from New York. She has a sister that lives in Queens, and then she has her best friend basically lives in the Bronx. She has no reason to be down here. When she does eventually get out, her plan is to take the bus back up to New York. Her family up there has looked into some rehabs. They found a program in Manhattan and a program in Queens. We've done all the initial paperwork for that, but nothing will be accepted until she actually goes there and is screened. So basically, she has a drug problem. She's had a drug problem for a long time. She does need, obviously Your Honor is here to address the victim and the family and justice in this case, but what I'm talking about with my client is for when that is done, she will need help with drugs. She knows that. So we do have a plan in place. She can be banished from Columbia County. Really, she doesn't plan to come back to Georgia. She doesn't need to be coming back to Georgia. She has facilities and help lined up in New York, but we understand completely that we're at the mercy of the court today. We're asking Your Honor to consider, obviously the drug use was intentional, but we're asking Your Honor to consider that she was not trying to cause this situation, and that she did have major defensive wounds. We're also asking Your Honor to consider her health issues, the fact that she's already been in jail for a year and a month. We understand that there's very likely going to be more time, but we're just asking Your Honor to take all that into consideration when factoring in a sentence here. I know my client had prepared a letter. I went over the letter with her. It was a little long-winded, but she really does want to briefly apologize, so if she could just do that.
Certainly. Yes, ma'am.
I want to look at society. Can you stand up?
I'm sorry, I think I may need you to step just a little bit closer to the microphone. I'm having a little bit of a hard time understanding, so just take your time.
I want to say something to my granddaughter.
Don't
Say,
tell me that.
You just need to say what you're going to say. If you want to apologize like we talked about, that's fine, but you can't say anything to anyone specific.
Sadie, I'm so sorry for what happened. I hope one day you can forgive me. I love you no matter what. Whether you forgive me or not, I love you. And I'm so sorry.
All right, thank you very much. And the only other thing was that the initial jail calls in this case were consistent with my client being an emotional wreck and horribly sorry about this from day one. And that's where I'll end. Thank you, Your Honor.
And I did have a couple of other questions.
Yes, Judge.
Was there an indication of when the second party left the residence? I'm assuming they were not there when the fire department showed up.
They were not seen or there. It was something that was, but it has come up throughout the case. All I can say is what the state was saying is that my client has said that she doesn't know who that is.
All right. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
And Ms. Newman, the first thing is if you would state your name for the record and just take your time, okay?
Sorry, I'm gonna let her stand up here so she can.
Sorry.
Sorry, Tom.
Good morning. My name is Tanya Hart. I'm Serenity's grandmother. I was the one that dropped her off that morning. And the dog was outside that morning. And there were no indications that she would be in any harm's way. Had I known there were drugs involved, I would have taken my grandbaby and taken off work that day, which my first mind told me to see about her that day, and I did not. Because spring break was coming up and I wanted to take a week off work to take her to spring break, so I was saving my time. Nevertheless, when you say it's not intentional, drugs is intentional. You have a choice. I don't have to tell her what she took from me or how I feel because she knows this. We've had numerous occasions about my feelings with Serenity and ensuring she's given Serenity the best care. She agreed to come from New York so Serenity didn't have to go into daycare. She agreed to come and help us. Sorry. For her to not feel taken advantage of, I paid her every week as if I would have paid the daycare. Because I didn't want her to feel like she was doing something, in vain, or she wasn't appreciated. She was very much appreciated. And this is why I paid her. When she asked for extra from me, I gave her extra just so Serenity could have the best care. I couldn't have afforded daycare for her. But she begged to mend her relationship with her grandbabies and her daughter. And that's what they allowed. I love Serenity, and I only wanted what was best for her. I never hesitated to give her anything extra she asked for because I wanted her to give Serenity the best care. Today and every day for the last year, I feel I paid you to kill or neglect my granddaughter. I don't expect anything from you, as you haven't given me or my son anything in the last year, not even an apology. Today, you did not deliver an apology to Jamal. He can't even be here, but that's okay. It's okay. You haven't given us an apology or an explanation. We don't hate you. We trusted you to care for Serenity. We believed you really wanted the best for her. We allowed you to manipulate us. We couldn't see through your lies and your drug use. We had no idea. You could not wait 4 hours. 8 to 12 is what Sadie and Jamal went to school. 8 to 12 and not every day. And you couldn't give us 4 hours for them to return to pick her up. They were on their way to pick her up when we got the call. You put drugs over our precious gift from God. We didn't see the real you. Judge, what I'm asking from you is for you to give us justice for Serenity. I'm begging you for the max sentence allowed by the state for this crime. It is a crime that could have been avoided had drugs not been involved. She would have been aware that the dog was let in the house, because the dog wasn't in the house that morning when I dropped her off. I specifically saw the dog and I was like, wow, he's mighty quiet this morning. I specifically saw the dog outside. That morning, I dropped Serenity off. The dog was outside, I'm sorry. From that day to this one, she doesn't know how the dog got in the house, so she says. But even so, she wasn't mentally or physically able to protect Serenity because of the drug use. Her drug use has been a problem 10, 15 years. She's had many opportunities to get help. She's had many convictions of drug use, yet she continues to use. Now it has cost me my grandbaby's life. And I have no doubt she will continue to use drugs if you let her out any sooner. I pray her use will not affect others as it has affected us. I'll go to this one. There were 2 living mammals in that house when Serenity was killed, great-grandmother and the dog. The dog has been sentenced to death. Is it fair to him? No, he wasn't in the house. His complete sentence was carried out with no time served for good behavior, his complete sentence was carried out. No getting out early for good behavior, no adoption, no options or other alternatives. He was provided death, his sentence, the full sentence. I ask you to do the same for this lady. She deserves to complete her entire sentence with no possibility of parole. She doesn't deserve time off for anything she has served for this charge. She needs to own her part with Serenity's death, just as the dog has done, and be held accountable. I'll address you, Judge. There is talk in the media about how people are getting less sentences for serious crimes and being let out of jail or prison early because of leniency. I'm asking you to show no mercy and give us justice for Serenity. I'm begging you to give her the max sentence she is being charged with for this crime she is being charged with. I understand she's been in jail for a year, and if you see fit to give her any time served for that year, then do so on the drug charges. However, I'm asking you for no leniency for the child neglect charge, because she could have waited 4 hours for Serenity and Jamal to pick up Serenity. She could have told us she didn't want to watch Serenity, as she has done so many times when she has other things to do. She was paid to give Serenity the best care, and she failed. She needs to be held accountable for her actions and her poor decisions she made. I pray you honor our wishes and give Serenity justice. Please think about your kids and your grandkids and what you would have done if you were in our shoes. What would you consider justice? Not only did she take Serenity from us, she took away Sadie lived with me. She took away Jamal's and Sadie's relationship. She took away our peace, part of our peace, and happiness. My son can't even come out of his room. He is a shell of a person. For an entire year, I've lost him as well. She left us empty. Why? For drugs. We tried to be that family unit for her. So again, I beg you to put yourself in our shoes and give her the max penalty with no option of parole. Thank you, Your Honor.
My name is Dynasty Rivera, and I am Serenity's aunt. and Mercedes' older sister. I wrote 2 things, and I'm not even gonna read any of it. I'm just gonna speak. The morning that Serenity died, I didn't have work until 11, and I wanted to call out so bad, but I was on the verge of losing my job. So I got up anyways at 7 in the morning, and I went into the room with my sister and Serenity, and she was happy. She was happy, the happiest she had ever been the whole 7 months I have ever seen her. She was the happiest the day that she died. And then Miss Tanya came and got her, and I remember her leaving, and I said I loved her, and she smiled and she left. When I got the call that she had got attacked, I was standing in the drive-thru at Sonic, where I currently had worked at, and I thought like, oh, this is gonna be a really bad recovery. Like nothing, I didn't think that she died. And when I found out that Serenity died, I remember being at Jamal's knees, begging him to tell me that he was lying. Because I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe somebody that we had so many problems with growing up had took the one thing that had healed my family. Serenity healed my family, and she broke it again. And for the sake of my sanity, I will forgive you one day, but today I do not forgive you. So Judge, I am asking you to please give her the max sentence. She has tormented my family for decades. And she ruined my mom, but she ruined my little sister. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
My name is Whitley Smith. I am Jamal's sister and Serenity's aunt. Losing my niece has been nothing but a nightmare, considering that I have 3 children of my own, 2 that are close in age with Red. My niece was my pride, joy, and everything I could ask for because she was in the home with me. I have other niece, but me and her, I watched her while Sadie and Jamal went to school before McDelia started watching her. I try my best to live life happy daily, but the moment that I think of my niece, I'm shattered into pieces. Nothing could ever stop the hurt, but I'm asking for no mercy on McDelia. She needs to be held accountable for all her actions and understand that because of her neglect, a beautiful soul was taken. I ask, Judge, that you give her and make her serve the max sentence with no parole. And that's all I have.
My name is Rosalie Rivera. I'm Serenity's grandmother, Sadie's mom. And we are here today in regards to the tragic loss of my beloved granddaughter, Serenity. My daughter and family has been broken, and I feel lost and out of touch with reality since her passing. It is with a heavy heart that I must inform you that her death was a result of neglectful actions that was caused by a relative who was her babysitter. Pain of losing my granddaughter in such a horrific way has been unbearable, and it has been difficult to come to terms with the fact that she is no longer with us. Every day I'm reminded of the immense void that Serenity's absence has left in her mother's life and our lives. The anguish and heartbreak that I have experienced since her passing are indescribable, and it has been a constant struggle to deal with and let go. I'm pleading with you to take into account the gravity of this situation and to assure that justice is served for my granddaughter's untimely death. My daughter, family, and I deserve closure and the knowledge to know that the responsible party will be held accountable for their actions. I'm also asking that she is sentenced to the max punishment that she can possibly get. I would also like for you to know that she is also my mother. So this is very hard, and it's been a very hard life because she has not been a mother to me. So trusting her with my grandbaby has been an ultimate curse because she begged to be the babysitter. I just need her to be punished.
Cora Moon, on behalf of the District Attorney's Office, I'm going to be reading this statement on behalf of Serenity's mother, Mercedes Rivera. I don't know how to put my feelings and experience into words, but I do know my life ended on March 22nd, 2022. When Migdalia came to me and asked to be my babysitter, I never would have imagined this would be the outcome. I trusted her with my most precious thing in my life, but instead she chose drugs. How can this happen if she was really watching Serenity? Why didn't she call 911? Serenity's life could have been saved. She was my baby, my blood, my creation, my daughter. She was only 7 months old. She's supposed to be here right now, not around my neck and on my shelf. Every day when I wake up, I'm reminded of what happened, that Serenity's gone. My mind instantly takes me back to me standing over Serenity, begging her to stay with me. I remember her face, her body, her smell. I relive it all over and over again every single day. I feel like I can't breathe without her, like I'm suffocating 24/7. She was my everything and had so much in store for her. She was going to be extraordinary. She was extraordinary, and she didn't deserve any of this. It's been over a year, and Migdalia has never reached out to me, my own grandmother. Not one phone call, not one letter, nothing. I recommend Migdalia is sentenced to the full extent of the law with no possibility of parole. I hope she sits in her decision to choose drugs over my baby girl's life. She deserves absolutely no mercy shown to her, and that's still nothing compared to the pain I feel every day.
Yeah, that's all we have from the family.
Judge, I just a couple of quick things. One thing is there was a common theme from the victims, and I just wanted to address it on behalf of my client, was in terms of my client apologizing or not apologizing, not reaching out to them. My client has been wanting to do that the whole time that I've been representing her. So it's not appropriate for her to call them from the jail. And it's something where today, when she had a much longer letter she wanted to read, I told her to just make a apology. So just for what that's worth, just so that people understand that is something that my client has been trying to do since day one. It's just not totally appropriate with the legal system. The only other thing I wanted to say was just that this is a blind plea to the indictment. So this is something where my client is taking full responsibility. It's not a. So I know Your Honor understand. It's something where she's taking full responsibility. We fully understand the tragedy, how serious it is. We fully understand that there's going to be more time. But we're just asking Your Honor to keep in mind that my client is taking full responsibility, not wanting to put anyone through a trial. Has been very sorry about this from day one.
Just, if I can just say one thing. I think the only thing, the most important thing to say to you, which is Serenity's mom, is that she brought that little life into this world, and she doesn't know how she ultimately left this world. Was she alone? Was she, what was happening to Serenity at that time? And I think it's more painful for her that this comes from her grandmother, the person who is also supposed to love this child. And I've never gotten the impression from this family that they felt like this defendant intended to kill Serenity that day. Certainly that was not the case. They never would have left this child in her care if they felt like she was going to hurt this child or allow necessarily this child to be hurt. But I think the fact that, you know, she chose to use drugs that day, and they will never know, this young woman who is incredible and has shown so much strength throughout this whole thing, she's never going to know what happened to that little precious face on that day. I mean, I've tried to fill in the blanks for her as much as I can, but that's really, I think, an important aspect of this. There was this unidentified person. The dog was locked. The back door was locked, and the dog was actually outside. So somebody locked that dog back outside before going to go get help for this baby. And I mean, that would be a reasonable thing to do, but we still don't have the pieces of this puzzle. And I think that's their biggest sticking point, is that, you know, having full acceptance of responsibility also involves having all of the pieces to that puzzle.
Ms. Guadalupe, do you believe it's in your best interest to go forward with your guilty plea?
Yes.
And are you satisfied with your counsel?
Yes.
And, Mr. McCants, have you had adequate time to communicate with your client?
Yes, Your Honor.
And have you discussed all potential defenses, including any mental health defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and Ms. Guadalupe, I would advise you that you would have 30 days from today's date to file any notice of appeal as to the voluntariness of your plea and any other issues with regard to the plea. You would have until the end of the term of court to file any motion to withdraw your guilty plea. However, if this motion were to be granted and you withdraw your guilty plea, your case would proceed to trial. Have you discussed these motions with your attorney? And you have to answer out loud, I'm sorry.
Yes.
All right, and I also need to advise you that on a felony charge, you would have 4 years to file any motion with regard to habeas corpus rights.
Yes.
All right, and do you understand by entering your plea of guilty, you are waiving and giving up those rights?
Yes.
And I will find that your plea has been freely and voluntarily entered and have signed an order to that effect.
Yes.
I will say to the family and the defendant, this is an horrific tragedy. A tragedy that could have been avoided with the choice of not utilizing drugs, and somehow the dog was allowed into the house, and I believe it was a pit, is that correct, or a pit mix?
It was a mix of several dogs. I don't know that you could attribute it to, but.
Okay. And with any large pets, you know, you have to be careful around infants. Serenity was 7 months old, so in a stroller, likely not able to walk or get away from this type of attack. I will say that it is important, and the court must consider the acceptance of responsibility in this case in imposing sentence, and avoiding not only the trauma of trial for the family, but admitting this and not requiring the state to prove this through trial. I will also tell the family this court has no ability or authority to have any control over parole eligibility in this state. So no matter what the court says, that goes to another completely different body that looks at these cases at some point and makes those determinations. And I believe for those determinations that if there were to be any consideration of parole, then you would be notified. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. And have an opportunity to be present and speak at any type of parole eligibility hearing. The loss of a child is always a significant loss. I've heard a history of drug use. I'm not sure of the circumstances of how you got to Augusta from New York, but it is my understanding that you were living in someone's home
Yes,
who was serving a prison sentence.
In the RSAT program, yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And as a result of, they were in RSAT, I'm assuming as a result of drug use.
I don't have that.
I mean, that's what
I understand.
the logical conclusion is RSAT is for substance abuse treatment. And so I don't know if this is someone that you knew or you were related to or what that connection was. But you had a responsibility that day to look after a child, your own grandchild. And your actions were absolutely reckless. I will impose sentence in the case. 10 years on count 1, followed by 3 years to be served on count 2, to run consecutive. I will require 6 years to be served in confinement, the balance to be served on probation, under very strict conditions. You'll have no opportunity to provide any daycare services, sitting, or any supervision over any minor children. You'll be subject to a Fourth Amendment waiver, random drug screens, completion of any drug and or alcohol program that is recommended by the probation office or parole office once you get to that point. I would ask that there be a screen for the prison RSAT in this case. I'm assuming that there is a request for no contact with any of the family?
Yes, Your Honor, no contact with anyone else.
No contact with any of the family members?
And just for clarity on that, her sister in New York is technically family, but, I mean, that's where
With
she.
the exception, what is her name?
Her name is, Maria Guadalupe, and she lives in Queens.
Maria Guadalupe. That would be the family exception with regard to contact. You are under oath, and I'm going to ask you this question. I know that you have said that you don't know who the person was that was with you. Are you able to give any identifying information as to who that individual was?
Yes, ma'am.
And what can you tell us?
His name was Sherman Hudson.
Yerman?
He's Sherman.
And Your Honor, at the conclusion of this, if maybe we could call her in the side room so that Ms. Steen could understand.
Yeah, that's what the last name is.
What's the last name?
Hudson.
I don't know if we can understand
Hudson, okay.
without,
Hudson, Husson.
Husson, Husson.
Husson? Okay.
Yes.
And the first name was what?
Sherman.
Sherman? Okay.
And,
I
ma'am,
also,
and let me ask this, would you be willing, with the assistance of your counsel, to continue to talk to the state about any information you have with regard to this individual?
yes,
All right. They will make a phone call to you
That's fine.
just briefly, for purposes of getting that further information in the case. I thank you for being honest about answering that question today.
yes, ma'am.
Because again, I think that is very important for this family to hear and know. You'll have a probation supervision fee, $50 public defender application fee. Report is directed to, the probation office upon any completion of parole. Comply with all terms of probation. Again, you may not be in the presence of minor children without supervision or have any supervisory authority over them. You'll need to sign releases with regard to the Fourth Amendment waiver and drug screen and evaluation releases as well. In the case of any other conditions I have missed.
Not that I'm aware of, Your Honor.
I just have one clarifying. I know it's up to the DOC completely, but her date of arrest was 3/25 of 2022.
That's correct, and that should be noted in the sentence.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Right, good luck, and again, Ms. Guadalupe, there will be a phone call that's coming to you in just a minute.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, that concludes Long Beach County Jail's business. May we be excused?
You may be excused if you'll just keep